News Channel 8's Rod Carter is live with the group this morning en route to Washington, D.C. How's the trip been so far, Rod?
Hey, so far so good, Gail, to be honest with you, up until a point, and I'll explain that in just a second. I'm with one of several buses from the statewide NAACP on their way to Washington, D.C. to commemorate that march, and you can see the group is behind me here. The bus has stopped. We stopped to take a quick break for everybody to stretch their legs a bit, use the bathroom, all that good stuff, and to fix one crucial component on that bus, and that would be a belt for the air conditioning because it started to get a little warm, so we're kind of in a bit of a holding pattern right now. We've been in the trip for about 3 hours. We're in Baldwin, Florida right now. But again, the 55 people that you see behind me all boarded that bus about midnight this morning, headed for D.C. There are several people who are on the trip from Leesburg. There's some folks from St. Petersburg. There's a lot of folks from Hillsborough County. All of them, again, there to commemorate the March on Washington, the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. And tomorrow there's the official event that takes place at the Lincoln Memorial, and there's also a number of speakers that will be speaking. You know, a lot of people back in 1963 who attended the March on Washington knew that they were a part of something that was historical, but perhaps did not realize just how historical that would be. I had a chance to sit down and talk one-on-one with a newspaper reporter, a former reporter from our area there in Tampa, to talk about being in the midst of that crowd, and he actually found himself covering the march quite by accident.
The March on Washington was an absolutely transformational event.
Jerry Blitzen was on the front line of history.
Everybody thought it would fail.
He was working in Congress in Washington, D.C. He was a newspaper man for the St. Petersburg Times when the march took place.
So I didn't have a press pass or anything, and I couldn't get up on the stage. But I had my White House press tag, and I wore that around my neck, and I could get through the crowds more or less that way.
The now 85-year-old remembers that day very vividly.
I never had seen that many people in one place in my life.
It was hot, he says.
Must have been 85 or so.
A long day, but no one complained, he said. Everyone, he says, peaceful, resolute, for the cause at hand, jobs and freedom. Everybody
also knew that if it was a peaceful march, the groundwork would be set for the passage of legislation in '63.
I was there as a reporter.
Blitzen, who showed me a picture of him and President Lyndon Johnson, says everyone was shocked
which is to my left,
to see some 250,000 people show up on that hot August day in 1963.
You know, that's a very long walk.
And walk to listen to speech after speech after speech and songs and declarations. He has very strong memories.
I guess my greatest memory was, I think, not Martin Luther King's speech, strangely enough, but John Lewis's speech.
John Lewis, who later became a congressman, was young and full of fire in '63. A fire Blitzen says some tried to quench that day.
He was a 23-year-old kid at the time, you know, and they tried to get him not to be so confrontational. So he did soften his speech. But what he said is, we've waited long enough.
But what Blitzen says he remembers most wasn't verbal, not even visual. It was emotional.
Everybody there had a feeling of hope.
So again, we're here in Baldwin on our way to Washington, D.C. We should be taking off here pretty soon and be back on the road. And I will see you guys in about 30 minutes with another update. Actually, Natalie, we are about to get back on the bus. As you can see, people are starting to load back on there. We are back on the road again. This group of 55 or so folks actually loaded on this bus originally about midnight on their way to Washington, D.C. for the March on Wash commemoration. Now, that is actually going to take place tomorrow. There are a lot of speakers that are lined up for that. But the event itself this is really the event itself, just the camaraderie and the people coming together to be able to go to that march. Now, for folks who attended the march, the original one in 1963, they realized at the time it was something big, but perhaps not as much as it became. I spoke with two women at the time. They were teenagers who took that trip to Washington, D.C. One took a plane, the other one took a bus, but they were both headed there for the same cause.
They came, it seems, from the four corners of the earth by bus, car, train. They had songs in their hearts, freedom on their minds.
So going to the march was in cars.
Among that crowd of 250,000 or so who marched on Washington that hot summer day in '63, Gwendolyn Tim Powell from Tampa, As a teenager, she loaded into one of 5 cars and drove to the March on Washington.
There was one station wagon, and we caravan to Washington, D.C. Everything was going well, and we had no fear. We were on our way to Washington. And then in Jessup, Georgia, the station wagon broke down.
One of the people in that caravan had family in Jessup who gave them a place to stay, gave them food, fixed the car, and they left the next day. They did arrive at the march a little late, but they were there.
It was a heady affair for me because we were making history, if you will. But I was not sure that I was all the way aware of everything.
The people, there were so many people.
Another teen was on a train that day to D.C. from West Palm Beach, Mrs. Leola Williams Butler.
I feel so blessed, even now 50 years later, to have been a part of that. It was a pivotal moment for me.
Were you afraid?
No, I wasn't afraid. You know, when you're young, you don't have much fear about a lot of things, you know. No, I wasn't afraid.
She remembers it well. Her friend, now husband of 50-plus years, gave up the chance to go so she could.
But I did know in my heart, and I knew from all the things that we've been involved in before, that it was going to be very, very important.
It left a major impact on her. She still has the original program from that march. She has newspaper articles from that day, even the train ticket from that trip, seat 44, car 11. But the physical mementos do not compare to the feeling in her heart, namely seeing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. speak.
Through the crowd and where I was standing, I wasn't, of course, very near to the front, but I had a good viewpoint. I could see him as he spoke. Oh, my God. If I think about it too long today, it'll make me tear up.
And a lot of people have that wonderful feeling as well, and everybody here is ready to go, so we're going to hop back on the bus. This gentleman here is actually, he's getting snacks out of my bag. I don't know what that's about, but no, we're ready to go. So, Natalie, we're going to throw things back to you, and we're going to hit the road, and we're D.C. bound, so we'll see you in a little bit. We'll see you about a half an hour. We are near Emporia, Virginia, in a bus on Interstate 95, and we have been on this bus all day long. Had a few mechanical issues and problems with air conditioning earlier on, but we've been on the road for hours now and making our way towards D.C. You know, this trip has been a great trip for these folks. As you can see behind me, they're all in really good spirits, and everybody's ready. Let's take a look at some video that we shot earlier this morning. At about midnight, actually, we hopped on the bus in Temple Terrace. There are 55 passengers on board this bus, and we left for the nation's capital about 12:45. And now these folks range in ages, too. There's some young folks on here. There's a student from Mount Pleasant Middle School in Tampa, a recent college graduates, some senior citizens. This bus trip is sponsored by the statewide NAACP. The bus, of course, from Hillsborough County, as well as 2 other buses from Jacksonville, one from Gainesville, one from Miami, one from Orange County. And nationwide, I'm told that the NAACP has roughly 600 buses that are on the road. And that's just the NAACP. Many other organizations have also sponsored buses to head to this anniversary. The chief planner of this event tells us that although it's a national NAACP effort to be here, for her, it's much more than that. To commemorate this march, it's personal.
Just to be here is going to be a memory that I will have forever. And I know maybe in 50 years from now, I won't be around to come, but at least I will have seen it in this lifetime.
And again, all of these folks, in fact, were just singing 3 minutes ago. They stopped singing as soon as we went on TV. What's up with that? All right, there we go. So we'll be in D.C. in just a couple of hours, and tomorrow the actual programs that are taking place, there's an 8 a.m. prayer breakfast, a 9 a.m. service, and then they march after that 9 a.m. service at noon. So we'll be here to cover all that for you. So, of course, stay with News Channel 8 today, News Channel 8 throughout the weekend. Stacy, or I should say, reporting live on Interstate 95 in a bus, I'm Rod Carter for News Channel 8.
News Channel 8's Rod Carter traveled with them, and he joins us now live from our nation's capital. Good morning, Rod.
Yolanda, good morning. You can see right over my right shoulder here the Washington Monument. We have a lot of folks here in the city in Washington, D.C. for this anniversary. Really kind of hard to tell how many people are here, but just to give you an idea of what we've been dealing with, we left our hotel. I'm, just so you know, embedded with the NAACP out of Hillsborough County on their bus coming up with them. We left our hotel at about 7:15, drove for about 20 minutes to RFK Stadium, hopped on the metro, rode that for about 20 minutes, and got out of that and walked for another 15 or 20 minutes and just kind of literally had to stop so that we could do a live report. And I've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of people along the way. So there are a lot of people here to commemorate this 50th anniversary. And again, as you mentioned, we're with the folks from the NAACP, and I just have just a handful of them here who have walked with me who are still hanging in tough. Now, we talked to a lot of them on the bus earlier about the situation and about just how historic it is to be here.
Destiny Jones is a 13-year-old student at Mount Pleasant Middle School in Tampa. She is the youngest person to board this NAACP bus headed to Washington, D.C. for the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington.
To go to the march and see what they've been through, like in the back days and how they march, and just to experience that.
Destiny's mother thought it was very important to not just tell her about history, but to let her live it.
I wanted her to have the experience, and so, so she can learn about the heritage and the things that we went through. Well, I won't say my parents went through, and my grandparents.
There are 55 people on board this charter bus.
I came ready. I am ready for this day. Looking forward to it.
Getting ready to go make history.
Filled with fire and zest, not even a mechanical issue and several-hour delay could quench their thirst for this day, because everyone here says it's personal.
When I was young, Martin Luther King came to my church, and the hysteria around that, him coming at night, my parents leaving the home very secretively, and all I know is Dr. King was coming. And then to later on see my mom grieve over his death, all that impacted me as a kid.
An impact not just on his life, but everyone on this bus as well.
I will be contributing to a historical moment that I teach and talk about all the time.
The struggle continues. Voting rights are being taken away. African-American job unemployment rate across the country is high.
Just to be here is going to be a memory that I will have forever.
And that is why Destiny is here, so she can experience this and share it in 50 years with her children, perhaps, and continue that dream.
And again, you can see just the people kind of on the corners here, and just across the street, you see the crowd waiting to get here. That's like the 4th or 5th or 6th wave of crowds coming along to make their way to the Washington Monument. There are a lot of events that are planned for today, a lot of speeches that'll take place. Nancy Pelosi is expected to speak. Al Sharpton expected to speak. In fact, a number of Martin Luther King Jr.'s children are expected to speak as well. And so this event officially kicked off about 8 o'clock this morning with a prayer service, and then the speaking is supposed to take place, and then there's going to be a march from here to the King Monument, and then everyone will disperse and head home. And again, this is the first of 2 commemorations, Yolanda. The second one actually takes place on the day of the anniversary, which is next Wednesday, and we're expecting the president to speak at that event. So we'll keep you posted on how things go throughout the day. We'll see you back here at noon. Yolanda?
Each of the speakers who took to the podium just over my shoulder had 2 minutes to deliver remarks. However, Attorney General Eric Holder, who came out and gave remarks to a thunderous applause, spoke for several minutes and seemed to rally up this crowd. Martin Luther King III, Reverend Sharpton himself, as well as Representative John Lewis, the only living speaker to address the crowd at that original march, took to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, where 50 years ago this month,
I have a dream,
King delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech. And once the speech is concluded, it was time to actually march on Washington. Those who traveled to be here felt the weight of this moment.
It's needed, most of all. And what could you not be? How can you not? For all those that suffered and died for us to have the right to do this, like my mother, I'm marching for not just me, but my whole family who fought the civil rights struggle. So I love it.
Now, there were some stark differences in this march than those in 1963, those who came here. Women played a much greater role in the march this year. There were a lot of speeches that talked about judicial injustice and talked about the Voting Rights Act of 1965, some of the actions that the Supreme Court took with regard to that. But I can tell you that everyone here came away with a feeling of just a sense of camaraderie and togetherness after this whole thing. And they also probably came away really tired, Josh, because there was a lot, and I do mean a lot of walking involved, and it did get a little warm at times.
Sure did, but still well worth it. All right, Rod Carter, thank you very much for that live report tonight from Laurel, Maryland.